Hello, and today we got Johnstone of Football Mindset, who helps the Scottish football players in the mental side of the game. So, John, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm not too bad. Just walked the dog not long ago, and looking out, the sky is still blue. Sun is shining, so yeah, all good.
That's great. So let's start off. How would you describe what you do and how you help players?
Good question. I go back and forth with my clients all the time about this. But have you played football yourself?
Yeah, I have.
Right. So do you know how at times before games you maybe feel things and think things that you don't want to feel and you don't want to think?
Mhm.
You ever had that before a game?
Yep.
I help footballers understand why they're feeling those things, why they're thinking those things, and what they need to do in order to change it. So it could be a case of footballers might doubt themselves before a game. Footballers might be stressed or anxious or worried about a certain thing happening in a game. Not only do I help them understand, well, why is that actually happening, but also understand or help them understand what they need to do in order to change it. But what I would say as well, though, is people working on their inner game or footballers working on their inner game, it's not just because they're in a struggle. So some players might come and work with me because they might be struggling with their confidence, they might be struggling with their belief. But at the same time, I've had other guys they're in a really good place, but they just want to make sure that they tick every box to give themselves the best chance of playing at as high a level as possible.
How did you get into your role here, and how long did it take for you? How long have you been doing it? Sorry.
I've been working on the mental side of the game with footballers. I've been doing that for about 4 years now. My journey, to give you a quick version, I left school at 17. I went and I was doing plumbing for 9 years, and then I became a personal trainer. So I started my own personal training business, and what became quite evident to me very early on with personal training was people were coming to me asking for a diet plan and a training plan. And I'd be asking them, have you had one of these before? And they'd be saying, yeah, maybe I've had 8 or 9. And I'm like, well, what has got to make mine any different? So what I started to understand quite early with personal training is people didn't have a diet problem, people didn't have a training problem, they had a problem between the ears. So I started to understand, well, people know what they need to eat, people know how they need to train, people know they want to lose weight and they really, really want to do it, but why can't they? So by understanding, like say, going away, working on the brain, going away and kind of studying neuroscience, I started to apply that through personal training, and then before I knew it, I pivoted or I changed direction, and instead of working with people with regards to personal training and fitness, I've always been football crazy. I've always been football daft. I've never been good enough to be a professional footballer myself. So I thought, let's see if I can take this into football. I tried to target a manager initially to take it into his club, but it became quite clear early on that a manager probably would have to overhaul his whole system in order to implement what I think players need with regards to the mental side of the game. And it was quite clear early on that that wasn't going to happen. So I'm like, well, if I'm looking for the manager to put this information in his club and give it to the player, why don't I just go straight to the player? So early doors, I knew I had a message. I believe that football and life is played between the ears. And I'm like, I've got a message here. How do I get it out? So I just went on my local football clubs. I just kind of spoke to them for free, done presentations, pub teams, amateur teams, junior teams, kids, adults, parents. I've worked kind of through all levels. And then obviously the first professional footballer came on board, and from there I've just sort of slowly built to what I have now.
What are common problems that players come with you and ask for about, and what do you help them with?
Probably one of the toughest things, not just for a footballer, but anybody in life, is people giving an opinion on them on a podcast. Opinions is the biggest one, mate. Whether it's podcasts, whether it's tweets, whether it's Instagram, whether it's direct messages. Because if you think about it, as a footballer, you're getting judged 24/7. Quite often your family has an opinion on your journey, and then you'll drive into training. The receptionist has an opinion. You'll maybe go in, you'll see a coach. For a coach, you then you'll see a masseur, or you see the physio. Then you go out onto a training park, then you do something, then your teammates are judging you, the manager's judging you. Are you good enough to be playing at the weekend? So opinions, I think, is the biggest one for the majority of players, and the biggest, not just for footballers, so that goes throughout life, but a footballer's kind of different in the fact of football is their job. People forget that being a footballer is a job, it's an occupation, but it's an occupation where you're getting judged 24/7. Are you good enough to play at the weekend? Because if you think about it, if you take, say, somebody working in a call centre, they can go in and they can put in a poor performance on the Monday, poor performance on the Tuesday, on the Wednesday or that, but they're still back in at work on the Monday. Whereas a footballer, if they have a poor day on the Monday and the Tuesday and the Wednesday, it then comes to the Saturday and they're like, you're not working today, just sit on the bench. So that, I'd say that's the biggest one, the dealing with other people's opinions, because you look at social media, you look at Twitter, full of sharks, you look at YouTube, full of sharks, and it's just 24/7. Like a lot of players now, you can make a mistake in a game, and before you're off the pitch, somebody's already tweeted about you, somebody's already posted about you, and I think, again, no matter whether it's a footballer or just one of us two, dealing with opinions, I think, is the hardest thing for anybody in life.
It's relentless. So how important do you think the mental side is compared to like the ability and that sort of thing?
I think that, again, people might think I need to say this, but for me, mindset's king. It's number one. So if you think about it, if you break a footballer or a footballer's what they need to do down into 5 different areas, you can look at the physical side, you can look at the nutritional side, look at the tactical side, look at the technical side, and then you look at the mental side. The mental side drives everything. So the food that the player eats, the training session that the player does, where they stand positionally on the park, how they kick the ball technically, everything's driven by the mind. So the mind is the driver of them all. So if you think, one that I speak to a lot of clients about, it's like a car. If you say we take a car and the car is diesel, if we put unleaded into that diesel, that car is not running as well as it needs to. That car is not performing to the level that it should and it is capable of. So for me, the mindset's the glue that holds everything together, and it's probably football's final frontier. And what I mean by that is we've got the nutritional information, it's all out there. The tactical information, technical information, the physical information, it's all out there, and without doubt these things will evolve and they will get better. But when it comes to the actual mental side and the driver of all these things, very, very few are actually working on it.
What pieces of advice would you give like your average football player playing Sunday League or that sort of thing?
One of the most powerful things I think could be, let's take before the game, for example. So when it comes to before the game, and quite often it's like, maybe you've been there, I know I've been there personally, what if I make a mistake, what if I give the ball away, what if it doesn't go well today? We have those questions in our head, and quite often you're taught that that's negative thinking, but for me that's normal thinking. When you look at the way that the brain's wired, that is normal thinking. So what if I give the ball away, what if I miss a chance, what if it doesn't go well today? Instead of seeing that as negative thinking, because what you're taught is that's negative thinking, don't think about it. And the more you try not to think about it, the louder and louder and louder it becomes. So to be able to silence that, what if I do make a mistake? What if I do give the ball away? What if I don't play well today? What if we do get beat? You need to have an answer to those questions. So quite often, it's like, what if I give the ball away today? Quite often a player's response is they give the ball away and it's a case of they tell themselves that they're crap, their head goes down and their confidence drops as a result. But dropping our head and telling ourselves we're crap, your confidence is going to drop. So what if I do give the ball away? Instead of kind of coming up with the response of I'll tell myself I'm crap and I'll drop my head, they need to build a better response, if that makes sense. So I would, instead of seeing negative thinking before a game and these questions that come up, instead of seeing that as negative thinking, I would see that as normal thinking. And those questions that come up into your head, you need to have an answer for it. It's like you doing this podcast. What if I stutter, or what if I forget to ask this question, or what if I stutter over one of the questions that I ask? Instead of fearing that happening, instead of not thinking about that happening, build a response for it. So you can then come on full of confidence knowing that if I do stutter through a question, or if I do forget where I'm at or what question I'm going to ask, if you already know what you're going to do in that situation, you'll feel better because you know, all right, now I need to do this. Whereas if you don't think about it and you just try, right, I'll try ignore that might happen. See, when it does happen, what then starts to happen is you panic.
What are common mistakes that your average players make in terms of mindset?
It's funny because I think that if you go through the levels, and what I mean by that is, say, kids through to, you could go amateur, you could go pub, you could go full-time, part-time, whatever kind of level you look at. I think players generally experience the same kind of things. So there'll be players that go out in front of, well, when normality resumes, they'll go in front of 50,000 people at Hampden, 60,000 people at Park Ken, and go, what if I give the ball away today? Or what if X or Y thinks that I'm not great today? Or you could have the pub player that goes out on a Sunday morning. He'll ask himself, what if I make a mistake today? What if I give the ball away today? So I think throughout the levels, footballers, they experience the same thing, but it might just be, say, a bigger volume of people, a bigger volume of noise, as in it could be 60,000 people shouting as opposed to 6 people shouting. But I think what a full-time player experiences and what a pub player experiences, there's so many similarities. Now, granted, a footballer, the outcome could affect their wage, it could affect their income, it could affect so many different things. Maybe, depending who you play for, Man United, you could be getting thousands of tweets about you. Maybe the pub player doesn't experience that, but there's so many things in between that they do. And I think one of the biggest mistakes, I think, or what I call it a mistake, is not knowing how the brain works. And I don't mean like, say, going in on a scientific level or kind of going in a massive deep dive, but just generally understanding how does the mind work. Because if we don't understand, we think this is a driver, or I see this as a driver of the nutrition, of the physical side, tactical side, technical side. But if we don't understand how the driver works, how can we then optimize all those other areas? Whereas if we start to understand, well, why do I think like that? Why do I feel like that? Why do I get a second booking when I knew I was on my first booking? If we understand how this works, it then just starts to allow us to go, right, I know why this is happening, and I know what I need to do in order to change it.
You've helped a few players with their injuries. How do you help them overcome that?
I think the biggest thing for, take an injury, for example, with, say, a guy's out, he's out for a year with a broken leg, or he's out for 8 months with a broken leg. I think in the lead up to that, quite often a footballer defines themselves as a footballer, so they see their self-worth as, I'm a footballer. Now that, again, that'll make sense to a lot of people, well, they are footballers, but instead of being defined as a footballer, you want to be defined by your name. So instead of seeing yourself as a podcast host, you want to see yourself defined by your name. Instead of seeing me as a coach, I want to be defined by my name. Because what happens, if you're a footballer who defines yourself as a footballer, so say I was a professional footballer and I just see myself as a footballer as opposed to seeing myself as John, when I then get injured, I'm then a footballer without football. How's that going to make me feel? I'm going to struggle. Why? Because all I see is I'm a footballer without the football. I don't see myself as a brother. I don't see myself as an uncle. I don't see myself as a partner, a friend, a boyfriend, all these kind of things. I just see myself as footballer without football. So I think the way that you define yourself before an injury is massive. But my kind of advice would be, if it is a long-term injury, chunk it down. So if you've got an 8-month injury, chunk it down to, right, what's the first target? What do you need to do in the first week? And then if you can get past the first week, what do you do in the second week? And if you can then do that so many times, now I don't think my maths is good enough, is it what? 8 by 4 is what, 32? If you can do that 32 times, you're then through 8 months. So I'd chunk it down, and also go back to what I was saying before, pre-match. What if I give the ball away? Quite often the fear of an injury, what if I get injured again? Answer it. Well, what if you do get injured? Because if you think, what if I break my leg again? See if you have an answer to that. You can then go out onto a park and express yourself and go, you know what? Breaking my leg again is not going to be great, but I know I can deal with it if it happens. Whereas if you don't build the response, it's then a case you go out onto a park and say, oh, I hope it doesn't happen. You start shirking tackles, you don't run as hard, and then kind of subconsciously you're not playing as well as you potentially could.
Just finally to end on, who is the best player you've worked with?
Best player I've worked with, without offending anybody, I'm going to say the best player I've worked with would be, everybody's got different attributes in that, but one I think's a top player, be my first client, John Suter. Unfortunately, obviously, recently he suffered an injury, or he suffered a couple of injuries recently, but the resilience and whatnot that he shows to continually bounce back, I think John's a top player, especially when you think about Scottish centre half, you think about stereotypically how we play the game. He doesn't play the game how a stereotypical centre half does. On the ball, fantastic. He's got a touch, he's got a rangy pass in. Like, see, some of the times you watch him pass that ball, it's like an arrow going through the sky. It's just been unfortunate recently with injuries, but I'd put John right up there in with regards to being one of the best. As I say, everybody's different positions, all that kind of stuff, but I think John's destined to be a top player.
Mm-hmm. Right, so that wraps it up. It's been a pleasure having you on, John. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure being on, my man.
Thank you.